Hi, welcome to all to another edition of the Marmor webinar series. My name is Sudhakaran Jampala and I'm a senior policy analyst with Marmor. Marmor is a majority owned subsidiary of Kuwait Finance Center Mercus. Established in 2010, Marmor has developed full-fledged research capabilities covering multiple areas such as infrastructure research, policy research, capital market studies, etc. Based out of the MENA region, Marmor is focused on serving the interdisciplinary knowledge needs of its various clients and stakeholders. With respect to today's topic, the topic is the Iran nuclear deal and the macroeconomic and geopolitical implications that it might have on the GCC. Questions can be asked at any time during the entire presentation. The questions will be dealt with towards the end of the presentation. And in case you would like to send questions by email, you're welcome to send it at sjampala@marcus.com, which is currently available on your screen. And also, I would like to tell you that this presentation will be uploaded onto the Marmor website within a couple of days, and the presentation material will be emailed across to you as well. The agenda for today's presentation is split into three parts. The first part being the unfolding of the Iran nuclear deal as to how the entire story has come about. The second part dealing with the Iran economy, especially with relation to the immediate past and the possible future if sanctions are lifted. And the third part deals with the broader macroeconomic and geopolitical implications for the GCC. This slide deals with a snapshot of the history so far. The Iranian program began way back in 1957 and it has seen various twists and turns. The most significant turns happened in the past decade, wherein from 2006, the United Nations, along with the US and the rest of the P5+1 partners, which are Russia, China, Britain, Germany, and France, together coordinated more extensive sanctions. And around 2012, the sanctions became very expansive, with the sanctions hitting hard at Iran's oil revenues and also cutting Iran off from the international banking system. And after lengthy discussion starting from 2013, which was held and facilitated by the GCC country of Oman, a final deal was struck in July 2015. The deal is pretty complex in terms of the compliance that Iran will have to demonstrate. Iran will have to show much progress in terms of its mothballing of its centrifuges, in terms of retooling an entire nuclear reactor, and so on. Since there are very many technicalities involved, I would just like to point out to you some key ramifications of the deal in terms of the fact that if Iran is found to be in violation of the deal, then the entire deal, which is termed as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action or the GCPOA, allows for a snapback of the sanctions. And in case Iran does demonstrate that it has abided by the deal, then around 150 billion in frozen accounts could be released within a very short time. Many participants across the entire spectrum, especially in the United States and the EU, have constantly picked on the refrain that this deal is built on the theme that it has been built completely on the ability to verify. President Obama of the United States has gone on to say that this deal is not built on trust, but purely on the ability for international partners to verify Iran's compliance with the deal. We are passing on to the next agenda, which is the Iran economy. This slide gives a brief overview of the Iran economy in terms of key indicators alongside that of other GCC countries. From the top metric, we can see that Iran is the second most, in terms of GDP, the second most key economy in the region, with around $404.132 billions in GDP. In spite of being the second largest economy in the region, Iran's per capita income is pretty low, and that coupled with a very high unemployment rate tells us that without a deal and without the ability to lift sanctions, Iran might run into very rough waters in terms of economy within a short space of time in the future. However, the deal has raised a lot of optimism in many circles with respect to the sort of opportunities that Iran might offer. From the graph on the left, which tracks Iranian GDP from 2008 and forecasting till about 2016-2017, we can see that since the time around March 2012 when very intense sanctions were put into place, the economy has contracted greatly, and concomitantly the Iranian currency has also lost much value against the American dollar. In fact, at one point in 2012-2013, the Iranian inflation rose to about 40%. The following slide also continues a similar picture, and it shows us that Iranian fiscal balance contracted in 2012-2013 into negative territory. And even in the face of the lifting of sanctions, it is expected that given the massive impact that the sanctions have had over the past 10 years, and especially since the past 5 years, the Iran economy, the Iran fiscal balance could still lie in the negative territory over the near-term future. However, there is expected to be some positive improvement in Iranian consumer prices index in case if sanctions are lifted quickly, given the fact that the Iranian currency would rally and it could be able to better support imports into the country. Among many countries in Europe and even countries such as Japan and South Korea, there's a lot of interest in terms of trying to bring in fresh investments into Iran. Iran itself is saying that there are $150 billion worth of oil investments available, and and in terms of infrastructure, the railway infrastructure itself needs around $25 billion in investments in the short-term future. In spite of all these massive opportunities, it should be pointed out that Iran still faces serious competitiveness issues. It is still a difficult place to do business, as you can see from the chart on the left, where registering property and dealing with construction permits can pose quite a number of challenges to aspiring investors. And also the fact that in terms of key pillars for competitiveness, we find a financial market that is still not yet up to international standards, obviously due to sanctions and due to the fact that investments have not been available to the Iranian economy. Now we go on to the final section of this entire presentation, the broader macroeconomic and geopolitical impact for the GCC. If Iran is able to be rehabilitated into the global economic mainstream, then there are two or three major themes that we would have to follow up on. The first being the fact that increased Iranian energy exports would come into the market. That's an obvious one. Iranian exports have almost reduced by half since 2012. Around in 2011, the country exported close to around 3 billion barrels per day, but they reduced around 1.8 to 1.1 to 1.8 by around 2013. So that obviously would mean that additional glut into the global oil system. Apart from that, since Iran occupies a key geostrategic position for China, it could also play a key role in terms of linking the East and West in terms of energy flows. For example, Iran could get connected with the China-Pakistan economic corridor, which envisages connecting the Pakistani port city of Gwadar to across the Pakistan terrain into China, so that energy can be transported by pipelines, by which China can avoid using sea lanes. Continuing on the same vein, Iran would also play a significant role in terms of China's ambitious Silk Road Initiative, or the One Road One Belt project. The project envisages that China can build a very powerful trade network stretching from Western Europe into China, and even taking strategic parts of Africa, so that Chinese goods can flow freely into these countries, and China would be able to import from these countries entirely via land. What this would do for China is enable it to avoid the Straits of Malacca, so that that choke point cannot come under pressure. So we can see that for China, Iran can play a significantly vital role in terms of geopolitical interest. Not only for China, even for India, another major economy in the region, Iran can act as a strategic hub linking Central Asia, a vital emerging market for Indian goods, and Russia with India. In terms of GCC trade with Iran, we would have to be careful not to lump it all together. There are a lot of nuances in terms of trade between individual GCC countries and Iran. For example, this slide shows us that a major trading partner for Iran in the GCC is the UAE. For instance, UAE contributes to around close to 97% of all exports that flow from the GCC into Iran. Similarly, UAE accounts for close to 63% of imports from Iran. The other major significant trading partner being Oman. So sticking with Oman, for Oman and Qatar, Iran can also act as an aggregator for energy and natural gas resources, by which the significant reserves can be transported by undersea pipelines to strategic markets like India and beyond, as you can see on the graph towards your right. In terms of impact on Iranian stock exchange, if sanctions are lifted, it should be borne in mind that the Iranian stock exchange is a pretty diverse one. It contains close to 450 companies, and one significant point is that Iran is not overly reliant on the energy sector. So for investors, a wide range of opportunities are available, including investments in automotive, the digital economy, and so on. One advantage that Iran has derived out of the sanctions is that it has been able to develop local capacities in terms of certain light manufacturing and the digital economy. So that could, if sanctions are lifted, that could prove to be those could prove to be significant areas to be looked into. Uh, we come to the close of the presentation. Before I close the presentation, I would like to stress on the fact that a number of uncertainties and geopolitical issues still remain in the picture. In case tensions arise between the United States and Iran, then the entire deal could come under risk. Not only, apart from that, October 18th of 2015 marked the adoption day, wherein all the parties come together to signal the start of the process of the deal. In December 2015, the IAEA, or the International Atomic Energy Agency, would be coming out with a report which should show whether Iran has made some progress in terms of its nuclear capacities with respect to its military. So, in case that report does not exude confidence, then again the deal could come under trouble. After the IAEA report in December 2015, the sanctions could be lifted within probably even 2 to 6 months, but the date is still uncertain, and the people behind the deal, that is United States and its other various partners, are calling it the implementation date, but the date for the removal of sanctions are not yet in place. So that's one very important takeaway. So yes, there are a number of opportunities available, but then the closing caveat should be that progress should be made in a slow, calculated, and in a much more studied fashion. Thank you very much for attending the webinar. In case you have any questions, you can ask them now. I'll be happy to take them. We have a question with respect to why the inflation was so high in 2013, as alluded to in the presentation. Around 2012, there were very stringent sanctions put into place by the United States, which cut off Iran from the international banking system and also prevented its ability to export oil. So the currency lost its value, and of course there was a tremendous impact on the economy in terms of the GDP, and that led to a massive spike in inflation. However, in 2013 there was a change in the regime, and there was this general sentiment that the change in regime could go on to prove beneficial to the economy, and the inflation started to come a bit under control from mid 2013 onwards. We have a question in terms of whether Iran would be restarting its refineries, which has been closed down for so long. In case sanctions are lifted in the short term, the answer to that would have to be yes, simply because of the fact that there's a lot of international interest in Iran, given the fact that Iran is one of those countries where the production cost is pretty low, even in difficult terrain and difficult fields within Iran, the cost would be around $30, which compared to our cost in the Arctic and other areas can prove to be very attractive. And a lot of European and American companies are showing interest. And thus, if the geopolitical tangle is resolved, there should be a massive inflow of investments into Iranian refineries. The other question being that what will Iran-China or Iran-India relations do to GCC? I think with respect to both China and India, both these countries would probably like to keep their their individual relationship with Iran and with the country of GCC on separate planes rather than trying to mix them up. Though I cannot speak for deep political and geopolitical matters, I would guess that the relationship between these two, between Iran and India, Iran China, should not have a deep impact on the way China GCC and China India GCC relationship develop. Uh, One more question comes from another participant who is asking whether the Iranian oil could prove to be could make conditions within the OPEC difficult. Iran is obviously an OPEC member, so it is to be seen how far OPEC would be able to accommodate in case sanctions are lifted. Iranian oil into system as well. I mean, it's still speculative at this stage, and we would not be able to give a very deterministic answer on that one. Another question asks whether, considering the progress made so far, would there be any geopolitical stability in the region? That again is a question that is beyond the scope of this presentation, wherein we are trying to deal only with the trade and economic aspects of the entire issue. However, the Iranian deal is only one part of a very vast puzzle set in terms of other tensions within the region. Hopefully, it would be positive. The other question is what impact would Iranian glut or Iranian surge of oil into the system would mean for the oil price? Uh, that again would be a difficult question to answer given the volatility that we are currently seeing. Given the current fundamentals, if the Iranian oil supply would were to come onto the mainstream, then probably the oil price would definitely come under further stress, and it would be up to the key players involved to determine an appropriate response to that. A question is asking whether the Middle Eastern pipeline towards India would have a beneficial impact for countries such as Qatar and Oman. As far as the current movement is concerned, it looks like yes, it would, because it would allow Iran to combine its gas reserves with Qatar and Oman, and then probably determine prices in terms of selling it to key strategic markets. But we should also be mindful of the fact that Iran and Qatar share from a single field, which is known as northern Pars in Qatar and southern Pars in Iran, and how they determine sharing formula for that very critical field, which hosts the most significant natural gas reserve in the world, would also play a key role in terms of how the entire Middle Eastern pipeline towards Iran and to further markets comes into play. we have a question that asks how the current geopolitical situation with respect to the Russian presence in Syria might have a fallout on the US deal. I mean, that again is a very geopolitical question, which obviously has a much more wider scope than that of this presentation. However, if the current crisis escalates, then it could be anybody say as to how that might impact the nuclear deal. I guess those are the final lot of questions. In case you do have any questions or comments to be addressed, please do not hesitate to email at the address given. And thank you one and all for attending. Wish you a good day ahead. Thank you.